You know that feeling, right? When everything's new. That fresh start. Maybe you just moved into a new place, got a new job, a new relationship even. Everything's clean, full of potential, utterly unblemished by the relentless grind of life. You're imagining all the wonderful, pristine moments to come, completely oblivious to the fact that you're essentially a lamb being led to the slaughter, just with slightly more thread count. That's pretty much how it felt for this particular couch, back when it was just a couch. Not the couch. Just a couch. It arrived, you see, wrapped in layers of protective plastic, smelling faintly of factory and new beginnings, which, for a piece of furniture, is pretty much the equivalent of a human baby smelling of milk and innocence. Sarah and Mark, its proud new owners, practically cooed over it as the delivery guys wrestled it through the narrow doorway of their slightly too small apartment. It was a beautiful thing, really. A deep, sophisticated charcoal gray, with firm, inviting cushions that hadn't yet learned the brutal geometry of human anatomy. Its legs were tapered, a tasteful dark wood, elevating it just enough to feel elegant, not squat. It wasn't just a place to sit, it was a statement. A declaration of adulting, of having their shit together, or at least, having a piece of furniture that looked like they did. They placed it against the longest wall in the living room, bathed in the gentle afternoon light that streamed through the window. For a brief, glorious period, it was treated with the kind of reverence usually reserved for expensive art or a newborn's first steps. People sat on it carefully, perching on the edge, as if afraid to disturb its perfect symmetry. Drinks were placed on coasters, miles away from the fabric. It was, in its own silent, fabric and foam way, deeply proud. Its purpose, clearly, was to elevate the very act of lounging. To provide a sophisticated backdrop for intellectual conversations, perhaps, or quiet, reflective evenings. It was a place for reading a good book, the kind with actual paper pages, not just scrolling endlessly on a glowing rectangle. It envisioned itself hosting polite guests, offering a comfortable, yet temporary, respite. An occasional guest bed, mind you, for a cousin from out of town, someone who understood the sanctity of a pristine sleeping surface. Oh, the naive optimism of new furniture. It truly is a sight to behold. It watched Sarah meticulously fluff its cushions after every use, smoothing out the faintest wrinkle. It observed Mark, initially, making a point to remove his shoes before even thinking about putting his feet up. There was a quiet hum of satisfaction in its springs, a gentle thrumming of contentment. Yes, it seemed to whisper to itself, this is my destiny. To be a pillar of comfort, an emblem of refined relaxation. To witness the quiet, ordered joy of a well-adjusted couple. It saw itself in a long, illustrious career of light use, the occasional carefully folded blanket, the gentle weight of a sleeping visitor. It believed in Sarah and Mark's promises to keep it nice, to maintain its dignity. It had no concept of the slow, insidious erosion of boundaries, the quiet creep of everyday chaos, the relentless, unforgiving force of human entropy. It was unblemished, unburdened, and utterly unaware that its crisp, elegant edges were about to be rounded off, not by time, but by the sheer, unyielding weight of human existence. It basked in that golden light, a monument to what could be, before it became a monument to what is. You know, you think you've got it tough, right? Alarm clock screaming at 6 a.m., lukewarm coffee, traffic, another Monday. But have you ever considered what it's like to be a brand new piece of furniture, full of promise, only to find yourself slowly, inevitably, becoming a casualty of domestic convenience? No? Didn't think so. Because that's a special kind of hell reserved for the truly unfortunate, like me. The couch. The charcoal gray marvel, if you recall, fresh from the showroom, all crisp lines and untouched fabric. My brief moment of glory, my pristine promise, it didn't last. Of course it didn't. Nothing good ever does. It started subtly, as these things always do. A late night. Mark, one of my owners, had been glued to the glowing screen, some digital war raging into the wee hours. Sarah, the other half of this dynamic duo, had long since retreated to the actual bed, leaving him to his pixelated fate. Around 2 a.m., the controller clattered. A groan. And then, the first shift. Not a gentle recline, mind you. More of a controlled collapse. He didn't even bother with a blanket, just sort of folded himself onto me, a human pretzel in sweatpants. I remember the surprise, the slight compression of my carefully arranged cushions. This wasn't a guest. This was a resident. A temporary one, sure, but the line had been crossed. The next morning, a faint impression of his head remained, a silent accusation against my once perfect surface. Did they notice? Probably not. It was just a couch. Then came the second time. And the third. And the fourth. It became a pattern. A predictable ritual of late-night gaming, followed by the inevitable thud of Mark's weary body. Sometimes it was gaming, sometimes it was a particularly long, poorly timed work call that stretched past midnight. Sometimes, honestly, it was just the aftermath of a minor spat with Sarah, a strategic retreat to avoid further engagement. You know the drill. The silent treatment, the dramatic sigh, the purposeful trek to the living room. And there I was, waiting. Always waiting. My cushions, once so eager to spring back, began to develop a memory. A subtle dip here, a slight flattening there. My once plump, unyielding structure started to conform, to remember the contours of a human form. It wasn't a comfortable memory. It was a slow, painful surrender of my original shape. And with bodies, inevitably, came the collateral damage. The first stain was a truly exquisite, almost artistic splash of crimson. Red wine, obviously. A clumsy reach for the remote, a moment of distraction, and splat. On my beautiful, charcoal gray armrest. Sarah gasped. Mark swore. A flurry of frantic dabbing with paper towels, a quick spray of some chemical concoction. Did it come out completely? Of course not. It never does. It just lightened, faded into a ghost of its former self, a permanent blush on my fabric. A badge of dishonor, if you ask me. After that, the floodgates opened. A rogue coffee dribble. A mysterious, greasy smudge from some late-night snack. Crumbs. So many crumbs. Little edible monuments to human sloppiness, burrowing deep into my seams, mocking my once immaculate appearance. It was like watching a pristine canvas slowly accumulate the detritus of a messy life. My transition from a luxury item, a statement piece, to a mere functional utility was complete. No ceremony. Just a slow, agonizing slide into the mundane. The shift in nomenclature was perhaps the most telling. What was once occasionally referred to as the guest bed for visiting relatives, a term whispered with a certain reverence, quietly mutated. It became the easy bed. Or, more frequently, just Mark's bed. As if I had always been destined for this. As if my purpose was not to hold polite conversation, but to cradle a snoring man and his nocturnal anxieties. The very sound of easy bed conjured images of convenience, of minimal effort, of a place chosen not for comfort, but for proximity to the TV or a quick escape from marital tension. My primary role had shifted. No longer was I the elegant host, I was the ever-present fallback. And I could feel it, you know? The increasing weight of responsibility. Not just the physical weight of Mark's body, though that was certainly a factor. It was the constant expectation. The knowledge that even when I was empty, I wasn't truly at rest. I was on standby. A silent sentinel, waiting for the next late-night gaming binge, the next argument, the next sudden onset of fatigue that would send him sprawling across my surface. My springs, once taut and eager to rebound, began to whisper. Not just gentle creaks, but deeper, more resonant groans. Warnings. Little metallic sighs of impending doom. They knew. I knew. This was just the beginning. The pristine promise had evaporated, replaced by the grim reality of being the default. And it was clear, painfully clear, that things were only going to get worse from here. You always think you've hit rock bottom, don't you? Oh, you sweet summer child. You have no idea. You know, you think you've seen it all when your purpose shifts from elegant seating to occasional crash pad. But that, my friend, was just the preamble. The polite little opening act before the main event where your entire identity gets swallowed whole by the relentless maw of domestic necessity. Because by now, the charcoal gray fabric, once a pristine statement of sophistication, was simply Mark's bed. And Sarah's, when Mark was particularly late, or particularly annoying, or when they both just couldn't be bothered to walk the extra 5 feet to their actual bed. It wasn't the guest bed anymore, not even the easy bed. It was the bed. Full stop. The default. The gravitational pull of comfort, or perhaps just sheer laziness, had firmly anchored me to this new, all-encompassing role. And with that promotion, came the expanded job description. Oh, the sheer breadth of human existence I now bore witness to. You think your morning routine is a drag? Try having someone else's entire waking life unfold directly on you. The mornings would begin not with gentle light, but with the groan of Mark stretching, his arm flopping across my armrest, sometimes startling me awake from the brief, unoccupied hours of pre-dawn. Then came the coffee, invariably balanced precariously on a cushion, a silent prayer escaping my springs each time he shifted. Sometimes it was just a mug, sometimes a full breakfast spread, bacon grease threatening the very integrity of my upholstery. You ever wonder what it's like to feel the slow, creeping dampness of spilled milk seeping into your very core, knowing it'll ferment there, a secret, milky horror beneath the surface? I do. Daily. Then the workday would begin. Oh, the glorious work-from-home era. My surface transformed into a makeshift office. Laptops, heavy and hot, digging into my lap. Papers, crisp at first, soon rumpled and stained, scattered like forgotten dreams. The rhythmic click-clack of a keyboard, the frustrated sighs, the endless video calls where Mark would adjust his posture, trying to look professional while his lower back was slowly conforming to the contours of my growing crater. Sometimes Sarah would join him, 2 separate, uncomfortable workstations, each vying for the prime spot, each adding their own particular blend of body heat and existential dread to my already overtaxed frame. My personal space? It wasn't just invaded, it was obliterated. There were no boundaries left. I was a public park bench, a communal workstation, a dining table, and a bed, all at once. Simultaneously. And then there was Whiskers. The cat. A creature of pure, unadulterated comfort-seeking, who saw me not as a piece of furniture, but as a giant, soft, perpetually warm cat bed, occasionally interrupted by large, noisy humans. He'd knead his claws into my fabric, a slow, deliberate shredding, a tiny, furry vandal systematically dismantling me, one thread at a time. He'd shed entire sweaters of gray and white fur, which would then weave themselves inextricably into my charcoal fibers, becoming a permanent, itchy tapestry of feline occupation. And the smells. Oh, the smells. Stale coffee, last night's takeout, the faint, lingering scent of unwashed human, and now, a distinct undercurrent of cat. A pungent symphony of domestic neglect. The cycle was relentless. Waking, a stretch and a groan. Eating, a shower of crumbs and drips. Working, the pressure of elbows and the hum of electronics. Arguing, the tense silence, the shifting weight of 2 people trying to occupy the same space while being miles apart emotionally. And then, finally, the retreat into sleep, the heavy, unconscious weight of a human form, pressing down, year after year. Day in, day out. It was a loop, a perpetual motion machine of human needs and canine, feline, desires, and I was the fulcrum, the silent, saggy witness to it all. I saw everything. The petty squabbles, the tender moments, the secret snacking, the late-night existential crises played out on my cushions. You think your life has no privacy? Try being a couch. A couch that is the bed. A couch that is the everything. The absurdity wasn't just a fleeting thought, it was the very air I breathed, the very dust that settled into my fibers. And I knew, with a certainty that only a perpetually occupied piece of furniture can possess, that it was only going to get worse. You know how some things just become. They don't choose their destiny, they just slide into it, one spilled coffee and one late-night gaming session at a time. Well, if you thought the journey from pristine showpiece to default bed was a descent, darling, you hadn't seen anything yet. That was merely the prelude, a gentle warm-up act before the main event where gravity itself decided to pick a fight with my very being. Years, that's what it was. Not just weeks, not months, but full, calendar-flipping, tax return filing years of relentless, unforgiving service. Every sunrise brought the promise of another day of being a human-shaped mold, a canvas for crumbs, a sponge for spilled hopes and dreams, mostly beer. The charcoal gray, once a statement of subtle elegance, was now less a color and more a historical document, a palimpsest of every stain, every abrasion, every faded patch where a limb had rested too long under a summer sunbeam. It wasn't just discolored, it was textured. A topography of domestic neglect. Every fiber, every thread, screamed a silent protest, a testament to the fact that fabric was simply not designed for this kind of sustained, multi-purpose abuse. My armrests, once firm and inviting, now offered the structural integrity of a damp sponge, collapsing inward with the slightest pressure, perpetually sticky from something that was probably once juice. The first serious sign, the one that truly screamed, structural failure imminent, was the groan. Not a sigh, not a creak, but a deep, guttural groan that seemed to emanate from the very core of my being, usually around 3 a.m. when Mark shifted for the 7th time, trying to find a non-existent comfortable spot. It was the sound of steel springs, once taut and proud, now twisted, bent, and occasionally snapped under the relentless pressure. Imagine your spine, but instead of cartilage and bone, it's cheap metal and compressed foam, and someone is constantly trying to sleep on it, eat on it, and occasionally wrestle a cat on it. That's the life. The groans became more frequent, more insistent, a metallic dirge accompanying every shift, every collapse, every attempt at finding solace on my increasingly hostile surface. They were a soundtrack to my slow, agonizing disintegration, a public service announcement for impending orthopedic disaster, yet no one seemed to truly hear them. Then came the crater. Oh, the crater. It started subtly, a slight dip where Mark's hip habitually rested, a gentle valley that promised a snug fit. But over time, with the unwavering dedication of a geological process, it deepened. It widened. It became a permanent, inescapable feature. The center of me, where once there was firm, unyielding support, was now a concave abyss. A divot, a hollow, a black hole of comfort from which no ergonomic support could escape. You could practically chart the trajectory of a falling remote control straight into its depths, never to be seen again until a desperate archaeology expedition beneath the cushions. It wasn't just sagging anymore, it was actively collapsing. The foam, once resilient, had given up the ghost, pulverized into a fine, inert dust that settled deep within my fabric, creating pockets of surprising hardness next to areas of utter void. To lie on me now was to embark on a topographical adventure, a journey across jagged peaks and sudden, precipitous drops, all within the confines of a single piece of furniture. It was a cruel joke, really, to be a bed that actively fought against the very concept of rest. And the owners? Sarah and Mark, bless their oblivious hearts, they noticed. Oh, they complained. Ugh, this couch is so uncomfortable now, Mark would grumble, pulling himself out of the crater with the effort of a deep-sea diver surfacing from a trench, rubbing his lower back with a grimace. My back is killing me. I feel like I'm sleeping in a hammock made of concrete. Sarah would echo, we really need a new one, this thing is just gone. I can feel the springs poking through when I try to work. She'd shift, poke, prod, as if a minor adjustment could magically restore structural integrity. But did they stop using it? Of course not. Where else would they go? The bed was for sleeping. This was for living. For the half-sleeps, the Netflix binges, the arguments, the silent treatments, the work-from-home spreadsheets, the cat naps, the late-night snacks. It was the designated combat zone, the neutral ground, the everything-else zone. It was their inertia, their habit, their sheer, stubborn necessity. My suffering was merely background noise to their daily grind, a mild inconvenience in their otherwise perfectly functional, if slightly saggy, existence. They'd even try to fluff me, punching at the now solidified cushions in a desperate, futile attempt to bring back some semblance of bounce, only to be met with the unyielding resistance of compressed fibers and broken dreams. I became a monument. Not to triumph or glory, but to past comfort. A saggy, stained testament to the sheer, unadulterated overuse of a simple piece of furniture. My once plush, inviting surface was now a bizarre topography of dips and bumps, a map of my slow, agonizing demise. There was the Mark crater, naturally. But then there were the satellite depressions, the Saradent from her laptop-on-lap work sessions, the whiskers hollow, permanently infused with cat hair, and the faint aroma of tuna, a cozy, fur-lined pit of feline contentment amidst human misery. Each bump, each valley, told a story of a moment when I was pushed a little further, stretched a little thinner, broken a little more. My springs sang a mournful, metallic dirge every time someone sat down, a symphony of structural protest. It was less a couch, more a geological survey of human indolence. And you knew, with a chilling certainty, that it was only going to get worse. The crater would deepen. The groans would become shrieks. And they would still find a way to wedge themselves in, because that's just what you do when you've lost all perspective on what comfort actually is. You adapt. You conform. You slowly but surely become the shape of the hole you've dug for yourself.